Everybody, this is Jerry McHugh Jr. I'm president of San Juan Resources, and welcome to this month's Improving Our San Juan RQ. And thanks for adjusting to the amended time for January. Thanks to all who are attending. We know how valuable your time is. We've had this 10-month pause here. The pause button has been hit. So key to me is making the effort with people, trying to stay connected. And thanks for all of you who have connected to this webcast today. We have a superb guest today, but first our topic, what happened these past 4 years at Interior? What can we expect from the new administration? What is going on with federal lands in the oil and gas industry? A little bit of housekeeping. There's a Q&A button on the bottom of the box. So put your questions in there for our guest. He is, and he's on the screen here, Casey Hammond. He served as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary and Acting Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals at the Department of Interior. Part of his responsibilities, he oversaw Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement, and he oversaw the Bureau of Land Management. Coming into the department as part of a beachhead team, Casey served from January 2017 to January 2021. Casey's career in public service includes an additional 16 years working on public lands issues in various capacities with the United States House of Representatives. He worked primarily for the Committee on Natural Resources, including time with the Subcommittee on Public Lands and Environmental Regulation, and the Subcommittee on National Parks, Forests, Public Lands, serving as both professional staff and as a senior advisor. So Casey, thanks for giving us this overview of your work at the DOI, interspersed with what's happened in the San Juan Basin. And welcome. It's so thankful that you're here to share with us, jumping on this webcast, 8 days after your job. So how are you doing after those 8 days? How is it being out of that mix?
It's a new, I don't want to say it's a new normal because I don't want it to be normal being at home. But it's definitely very unique. For the last, going back 4 years ago to January 17, when my wife asked me what it'll be like working at Interior, and I said, well, basically, you shouldn't expect to see me for about 4 years. And I was around a little bit here and there, but for the most part, that was true. I just wasn't home very much. The hours were, they're long hours, and they're very involved, and so it's different not having to set an early alarm every morning, and having a little bit more time to get things done around the house, and trying to help more with the kids, things like that. But it's only been a week, so it's still very strange not to be going in. But at the same time,
talk about the beachhead team,
mm-hmm.
and I mean, you're one of the few wire-to-wire people you're telling me. So that's interesting. Those two things.
Yeah. So January 20th of 17, 30 of us, we met outside the Department of the Interior. We went inside about 1:45 noon and watched the president get sworn in. And then we took the oath of office, and we're off and running, and literally running the department of 70,000 people. So it was a big change from going to House of Representatives as a staff member there to overseeing the senior staff of, Fish and Wildlife Service to begin with, is where I was for the first 8 or so months before I went to Lands and Minerals. But that was a big adjustment too, because you had to immediately absorb everything that was going on, get up to speed on hot issues, make decisions on litigation. Not something I'd had to do on the Hill before. So a very busy time, but looking back, it was a very rewarding time, and we were able to accomplish some good things in those early days, early
And
months.
you're a wire-to-wire appointee too, right?
Yeah. So I was a political appointee that entire time, and work at the pleasure of the president, and was just fortunate enough to be there for the entire term of the administration.
Okay, and so when I first introduced you, advised you to get on the IQ this month, we talked on the 7th of January. That was the day after that day, the 6th. So what was that like for you at that time back there?
And I'd never seen anything like it. It was strange. It was surreal, having worked in the Capitol building years ago, and then of course on the Capitol complex itself for such a long time, to see people going in like that. But ultimately, I think I probably the same reaction as everyone else. It was just completely out of line and counterproductive. Whatever people's thoughts are in the election, I don't know that what happened to the Capitol served any purpose whatsoever, and only hurt
Right.
the president. So
Very small fringe. Yeah.
yeah, so that's just something we have to roll with. It definitely put a damper on things for the last couple of weeks. It didn't really slow us down, but you had that kind of hanging over you for the last couple of weeks that we were there trying to really get things done. And we worked basically till the last minute we worked until we had to turn in our equipment, getting things done.
Wow.
And basically push us out the door.
So what were some of the better accomplishments under the past administration? And talk about that.
So there's a lot of things I'll look back that I'm happy about. I think the first one would be in BLM Move West. I think it's a bigger deal than maybe realize at this point, to actually move a headquarters out of DC, to just challenge that conventional thinking that a headquarters has to be in DC, that it has to be down the street from the Hill, or down the street or a couple blocks from the White House. Our feeling was that where it needs to be is in the West, where people are impacted by the decisions and not insulated by a long flight or 2 long flights from the constituents that are actually there. So now we have it where our senior leadership is a very short flight or a drive away from looking at the things they're actually working on. It's a crazy concept. I was often in the position of having to make decisions on things I hadn't seen for myself on the ground. And I don't think that's the way things should be done, but it was a situation I was in. You have a briefing paper, and you have meetings and briefings and maps and whatever else, sometimes photos, but the best way to make a decision is to actually see something on the ground.
Will the BLM director be in Grand Junction then, residing there?
So that's the way we left things, is that position, the director position, would actually be at Grand Junction. The senior staff is all moved there. The chief of staff is there. The senior leadership is all there now. What the next group chooses to do, I kind of think what they'll do is move the director or the new director, whoever, acting director, whoever it is, they'll have them based in Washington, and say, hey, we moved BLM back west and claim victory. But in reality, the senior leadership will likely stay in Junction. And then the other kind of 300 or so people that had been in Washington, those positions have all been reassigned across the West. So they're in Santa Fe, they're in Salt Lake City or Boise or Billings. They've all kind of been dispersed. So the thought of reassembling all those people, many of which only took those jobs out there because they were out West, they didn't want to be in DC. One thing that people don't talk about is much of the move West was done by just reassigning positions, not even assigning people. They were just vacant positions that we didn't hire intentionally, so we could reassign them out West. So it didn't physically involve anything but paperwork. So anyways, I think that whether they choose to do something with that or not, the next crew or the current crew, I couldn't tell you. I think they turned it into a political issue, and it really shouldn't have been. It's really just kind of a common sense thing. It saves a ton of money. I think it pays for itself after 2.5 years. and then
A
just,
concept in government, huh?
yeah, yeah. I mean, just the idea of being accountable is kind of one of the major themes of our entire time, really, was making our senior folks accountable, primarily those state directors. For so long, they'd been able to kind of rubber stamp the NEPA work that had been done in their states, and it just kind of got passed through, or they'd, maybe get a briefing on it, but we made it so, no, you need to be responsible for every paragraph and comma and period and have read the document. So if it's 4,000 pages, you better have read the 4,000 pages. If it's
Okay.
300 pages, which we try to condense it down to 300 pages or 150 pages, depending on the topic, you better have read it, because it's you that's on the line for it now. And I think that changed things dramatically. Our quality of the products went way up in our 4 years. So, but accountability across the board was just a major theme that we
Okay.
always carried.
What about, we talked about the president and his involvement. Talk about that a little bit.
So the president was actually amazing. We always had solid support from the White House for things we were doing. I was concerned before the president was elected that he's a Republican from Manhattan, and who knows how that's going to go. We don't have the best history with Northeastern Republicans on natural resource issues. So I had some concern, but I mean, immediately those went away. He had a strong energy focus, seemed to get it on Western issues, and never really reined us in. And we were given a ton of latitude on things to do that no Republican president, Bush certainly would have not let us do, which is ironic considering he was considered like an oil positive or oil president. But we were able to go much further than they were able to go in the Bush administration. I think a Romney administration probably would have been questionable at best on our issues. But the president was supportive. We had great support from White House staff. Obviously we had great leadership inside the department with Secretary Bernhardt and Secretary Zinke that really kept pushing and pushing and pushing and never really let up. And I really appreciate that, because that's how my experience was in the House of Representatives too. Is
Okay.
I was able to push and push and push, and some things you got reined in, but for the most part, I worked for guys that saw eye to eye with philosophically, and they were also aggressive. So no, the president was, I think, just amazing on our issues. To have a president appear at an oil rig, for example, Bush never would have done that. And just talking about the pride in American energy and how important it is, and how the freedom that it gives us as a country, that we're producing our own energy and exporting oil and gas. It's, something that unfortunately people take for granted now. And I think it's gonna be a big mistake that people make if they do that. You and I have talked about this. I love cheap energy. I know for you all, that's not the best thing in the world, but I love it. I love going to the gas station and seeing cheap gas. It helps with my emotional well-being. And I know it does for other people too. And that just goes all the way up down to what you put in the shopping cart too, right? It impacts everything. So I know you guys would like $150 barrel oil, but I love it cheap. I'd love to.
What about unfinished projects? Any things like that I know we talked about some COVID interrupted things, so that was part of a big problem.
So COVID, we had to make some adjustments for COVID for a time. We stayed at home and kind of just buried away in our own houses. But then at some point, when I say we all the political appointees went back to the building. So a building that usually had like 1,500 people, there was about 150 people. Political appointees, janitors, and guards. That was it. But I enjoyed the quiet, and we got a lot of stuff done, and didn't have a lot of distractions. So it was actually kind of nice to have. And there's no traffic. You can't beat that.
Wow.
I love that. But no, there's some things that we'll leave on the table. Some things in New Mexico that were big priorities. That state director job. I'd prefer to not have left that state director job open. And
Right, it had been open for what, 2 or 3, 4 years?
well, it was open for a time, and then Tim Spizak was there, and then we moved him out, and he retired, and so that's one thing. Carlsbad and Farmington resource management plans were big priorities. We weren't able to get those across the finish line for a variety of reasons.
Right, right.
Unfortunately, COVID being the primary reason.
Yeah. So let's pivot over to New Mexico. Some of your accomplishments, activity in our amazing San Juan Basin. What can you talk about there?
Going back to what I was saying on accountability, my hope is that some of the things we achieved with permitting, I'd like to say I hope they'll be long lasting when you put things in there that will be long lasting, but the first thing they did is turned off permitting and leasing for 60 days. So, but I think we put some structural things in there and some priorities in there to where, if things do start up again, you'll have a more accountable staff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis in those BLM offices, that your APDs won't linger for hundreds of days. Really, they should be, I think statutorily 90 days, and they were never close to that. But I think we had it down to maybe in the low hundreds or high 90s when we left.
Okay.
And that's with I don't even know the final numbers, but we were going to set a record in this last year for APDs processed. So that really picked up, but there was still more work to be done there. There's still a lot more work to be done there, and getting people housed in New Mexico has been a challenge. But I think what we tried to do is just give people confidence as much as possible. And you did see a big investment in the San Juan Basin there in the last 6 months or so. We were very excited to see that, and hopefully that's able to pick up again.
Okay. Well, I think we mentioned the AFMIS system fouling up last week. We thought it was a coincidence on that. And that was the first you'd heard of it, obviously, because you weren't in the job.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. I'm sort of out of the loop now on some of those things. Some of those things intentionally out of the loop on. But
and explain AFMIS is the automatic filing system.
Yep, and they've dumped, before we even got there, they dumped so much money into that, updating it, and there'd been some success, but we heard from producers regularly that they were still running into problems and things were being kicked out, and at some point we heard people say they'd just rather go back to paper. Now, the numbers on our side showed that there had been improvement using AFMIS, like dramatic improvement on the federal processing side. Now, the hang up there was, what was on the other side? Like what did that actually mean when they were kicking things back to the producers or the applicants? So that should those things been resolved at the BLM, or were they just kicking things back to the producer to pad their own numbers? I think by and large, we still made a lot of improvement, but there was still some funny business with.
Question here, back on the BLM, is the acting director in New Mexico still Stephen Wells?
Yeah, Steve Wells is still there. At least he was there a week ago.
Okay.
Yes, Wells is still there, and he's been good on our issues. I think this position's challenging for him, but on oil and gas issues, he's done a good job from a national perspective.
So we got to know each other a little bit during some NEPA matters. That was the climate change issues, and as we talked the other day, there was not one size fits all NEPA complaint, and each NEPA document in any area could be all different. So talk about that a little bit, at least as it relates to New Mexico, because I know we had our climate change one in the San Pedro area, and then there's the Dene 2 and 3. So
yeah, so we were facing different. Oddly enough, I guess I should say, not surprisingly, the first cases we faced with regard to climate change were originated in the previous administration. So I used to joke that the Trump administration was happy to clean up the climate mistakes of the Obama administration because they didn't take climate change seriously. Um, and um, so we were left to clean up a lot of kind of maybe intentional errors. I don't know. But what we try to do is cure those deficiencies in the NEPA as they came up. And we're able to do that successfully in a lot of cases. But, as you have different districts, you have different judges and that don't see things the same way. And, two different judges could look at basically the same NEPA and see it differently. But one mistake that we make at BLM is we weren't doing analysis consistently on these matters. So you'd have Utah doing it different than Colorado, than Wyoming, than New Mexico. So it made it difficult to have a standard approach that we could present to judges across the West or in DC, and that ended up hurting us. With more time, I think we would have got over that hurdle. But our approach on those cases was basically, let's look at the case, let's see what kind of delays we're looking at, how can we cure the NEPA in a timely manner, move on so people can produce or do what they will with their permits or leases. But in other cases, we had to ask for remand and do a little bit more work. It just really depended on the specifics of the case. And it was honestly a very frustrating process, but it's more frustrating for the people holding leases waiting to try to operate those. But yeah, that was our approach, is how can we work through this, get a good standard in place so when we do the NEPA the next time, it has a good chance of holding up, but at the same time cure the problems that the judge identified in a specific case.
Okay. Any last minute moves by the Department of Interior under your watch?
We did a lot of things the last week. We did a ton of things December and January, that I'm happy that we got done. Converse County in Wyoming is a big year-round drilling project. We were able to get done finally. Really happy about that. Anything that involved jobs was the most satisfying. And I think that's going back to what I was saying earlier about the president, is that's one of the things that made the job really fun. Is our only real assignment was to create jobs or protect jobs or save jobs, whatever, and get the government out of the way as much as possible. So that's, it's a satisfying way to go to work every day when you're not really charged with worrying about the politics of it. Like, I'm a political person, so I'm always thinking about that, but the real focus was on jobs. And, unfortunately the first moves of the new administration has been to destroy jobs, which is maybe what they enjoy doing. I don't know. But able to get Converse County done. Not in your realm as much, but some of the things we did with fire and vegetation management, we got done that last week. Some sage grouse work we got done last week. Just a bunch of stuff in Alaska. The ANWR leases were issued. And coincidentally, that the lease sale was on the 6th, and we got those leases out before we left, which I don't think anyone predicted us doing, but we're able to work hard on that. So a lot of good stuff was done with whatever time we had. Honestly, we just wanted to get as much done as we could. We knew all along we were only going to have 4 years guaranteed, and then after that everything would have to be gravy. But there's still things we left on the table that I needed a little bit more time, another month, another 2 months. Onshore orders 3, 4, and 5. We were so close on that, getting it done. And a lot of work went into that. So
are they close to getting done with this administration? Will they wrap it up within a year, or will they just let it go?
I don't know. Honestly, don't know. I mean,
do they care about having those things done?
I guess it depends on who they end up hiring for BLM and how receptive they are, because I think some of those things are just common sense. They're very technical, not controversial things in my mind.
Okay.
Site security and measurements. It's not
Right.
a
Right.
controversial thing.
Protocols and making sure that
Unfortunately, I think,
skills and things are measured properly, commingling and things like that.
yeah, and the things we were trying to correct, I think we were correcting them because the previous administration had overreached on some of them and tried to be punitive with some of those things. But we'll see what this crew does. I mean, I think their initial approach has been, "Oh, we'll just shut it down." And I think you and I talked about, that's one of the frightening things I discovered my time in the federal government or the executive branch, was how much power you have to just destroy an industry. Like someone at my level could pretty much shut down the Gulf or shut down production on federal land onshore overnight, stroke of a pen. And it might even be illegal, but good luck.
Right. Yeah.
If you're in that position, that you have you have DOJ on your side with their unlimited resources. So that's one thing that's concerning is how much genuine effort will they put into what their policies are going to be, or will it just be kind of a reactionary shut it down approach? And so far it's just been shut it down. And
what about the Farmington RMP? Secretary Bernhardt this is a question again, had been in Farmington, pledged that it would be completed. How close are we on that in the San Juan Basin?
So, we got the draft out for comment. The problem is with the COVID, that comment period got extended, which really wasn't my preference. I think we should have just rolled with it. We did virtual meetings everywhere else. Even in Alaska, we're able to do virtual meetings over radio, phone, and internet. And I think, with being very sensitive to some of the populations down there that were hit hard, I understand that completely. But I think we still could have pushed ahead. Almost everyone has access to a phone and could call in. We end up having more participation on our virtual meetings and virtual public meetings than we ever did on in-person meetings.
I'm sure. Yeah, it's probably a real plus, really.
Yeah. But that wasn't enough for some people. Some people were just looking for ways to shut it down, and we get that. So my preference would have been to push forward. Ultimately the decision was made to extend, and that crushed us.
Right. So any thoughts on the new administration? You're an insider, and you probably know where what they can do. Like you say, the power that you even had to shut things down or to make things work.
Yeah, I think there's such a draconian approach to the climate issue. It kind of paints everything that they do, like everything has this climate hook or environmental justice hook, and naturally must be bad. Then any kind of development must be bad. I think they'll get to a point where they get a little bit beyond that as some of their folks go through Senate confirmation. Some backlash from, say, your governor. Hopefully your governor understands what could happen to her own state. That's one thing. Every time I was in New Mexico, I tried to remind people, it's like, look, don't let your local politicians get away with not understanding where this comes from, where 40% of their state budget comes from. He's just gonna have to keep doing that. When it impacts the schools, when it impacts the police and fire departments, maybe people will wake up to the fact that this money isn't falling from the sky. It's kind of coming from the ground, and they should appreciate that. So I think some political realities will set in, but I've even been surprised how far they've been willing to go so quickly to just overtly destroy jobs. Like Keystone is a perfect example. The Keystone makes no sense to block. Only thing you're doing is putting oil on trains and trucks now. If that's the preference, fine, but it doesn't make sense to me. So just to destroy those jobs with so much pipe in the ground already as well, the
Right,
crossing's done.
right.
Most of the BLM stuff is done. What they've been working, what we were working on them most recently with was on the pump stations. So I don't know where that ends up. It's super short-sighted, and I don't think the current president, left himself much wiggle room on that issue. You should always leave yourself an out, and doesn't seem to have done that. So it's not an encouraging move. Let's put it that way.
Right,
So
right.
I'm concerned about it. But look, like me, most people like to go to the gas station and not, spend $150 filling up the gas tank. That it's a psychological high to pay for cheap gas, and hopefully people understand that's not where it begins and ends. It also goes to all the other products they use around the house.
Right,
And
right. So this isn't a political conversation. Usually we try to stay away from that, but I noticed that the Indian tribes complained about, one of them did in Utah, about drilling, or banning leasing, banning drilling, all this sort of stuff.
sure.
And the spokesman for Interior was really quick to say, "Oh, we didn't mean Indian tribes. We know that, you guys are really suffering and blah, blah, blah," all this sort of stuff. However, there are people in our own industry, companies, small companies, family businesses, mom and pop operations in Farmington and Aztec and Bloomfield and Carlsbad, Hobbs, Roswell. I mean, I guess we don't matter as much as the Native American tribes. Is this kind of like a shot across the bow? We're trying to say, okay, we've placated our progressive left, and maybe it'll taper off. And that's kind of my thought. I don't know. I don't know how these. I know how they think, but I don't know how they're going to decide on these things either.
I just think it shows they're not well thought out. I think when they announced that Deb Haaland was going to be the nominee for Interior, people immediately assumed like, oh, well, this is going to be great for all tribes. Like, no, she's a member of a tribe. She's not a member of all of these tribes. So there's still going to be differences among the different tribes that she's going to have to negotiate her way through. Not all tribes think the same way. They're all I think you all know that they're all distinct. They have their own opinions. They have their own interests. And oil and gas is one of those. Farmington's a perfect example. You have allottees that really want to be able to develop in the vicinity of Chaco, and they've come to us and said that.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're going to have to look those folks in the face and say, no, you're not worth it. These environmental groups are more worth it, or these people that never even come to New Mexico are more worth it than you and your jobs and your families. So, it's incredibly frustrating. The Ute tribes rightly spoke. The Ute tribe rightly spoke up and said, "What about us?" But you're right. I mean, who is it okay to screw over? And they're going to have to make that determination.
You talked about the courts also being a help in the next 3 to 4 years. They were a hindrance depending on the judge you picked or that somebody picked, but they could also be helpful for. And I know we had set up a lot of things over during Obama and even Bush also. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh, the courts. It just blew my mind how you could put thousands of hours, millions of dollars into a decision, and one judge and his or her clerk can completely throw that out. And there's no multiple choice test to prove that they actually even read the record. And we had cases where the judge clearly just didn't read the record. Would say stuff in the decision that was completely contradicted by black and white in the record. And there's no real recourse. Okay, we're going to appeal. But if the judge doesn't really care what's in the record, they're just making a philosophical call or a political call. There's not much you can do about that. So we ran into that quite a bit, and that's just infuriating, but that's the fun process that we set up. And there's been other cases where venting and flaring, I think that's one of the things we were really happy to get done, was to get the Obama venting and flaring rule out. it ended up being, restored. And when was that? September or August.
Mhm.
And then, the case that was on hold against the Obama venting a flare in Wyoming was revived, and their rule was thrown out. And of course, you all know we're back to NTL 4A. So there's been cases where common sense was reached too, but overall, it's just a strange way to do business where, and our NEPA work reflected this as well. Where NEPA had gone was basically a defensive 4,000 page documents on EISs that only considered, what a judge might think or how the other side might sue, and it really didn't have much to do with the decision at the end of the day. So we refocused that to be, okay, now let's focus on the decision and quit creating things that you can be sued on. Stop raising things that you're going to be sued on, and just stick to the decision and the facts, and we'll take it from there. So we'll see what kind of dividends that pays. But overall, that was one of the more challenging things, was coming in early on, like I said, and having to make decisions on litigation on cases that had been going one direction under the previous administration, and trying to find a way. One of my earliest memories is, basically being like locked in a room where they told me, you have to make a decision on this or else we're gonna be in contempt of court. And this is the decision you have to make. And I was like, no, I think it's a terrible decision. I'm not going to sign off on that, but we're going to be in contempt of court. It's like, well, who's going to prison? Not me. So I don't care. They can throw that guy into prison. I'll be fine with that.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of that too, that learning curve of how you not only change the direction of policy when it had been going one direction for 8 years or more, but do that same thing with litigation. I was already working down the litigation pipeline.
Okay. Huh.
So yeah, I wish that stuff was more night and day, where it was like, I don't like the direction you're going, so change it. It just doesn't work that way.
Did the tone ever change with that, or was it always? I mean, it sounded like you guys changed the tone. It's like jobs are important, and we're being fair on this. And you even said that some of the NEPA that came out of Obama was really not helping the environment.
No.
Any tone change?
Yeah, I think that was, our primary goal at the outset, and through the entire thing, was changing the tone to focus on people and being accountable to our constituents, rather than just focusing on a philosophical outcome. And as I mentioned earlier, jobs was always priority number one.
Okay, I had a question here. What about federal units? Now you're out of the hot seat here, but you can opt in. How will federal units that combine federal and tribal lands be dealt with if permits are allowed on tribal lands but not on the federal lands?
It's a great question. I don't know. It's a fantastic question. That's one of the things they're going to have to work their way through. And that's not an uncommon situation in New Mexico or North Dakota or Wyoming. You run into those issues. So good luck to them figuring that out. I wish I had a better answer for you. I'm not sure how they weave their way through that one.
Okay.
Your oil and gas is bad because you're not a member of a tribe. Have fun figuring that one out.
It's greener gas from the tribe versus the non-Native American companies. Okay, what are the prospects for non-hydrocarbon development on federal lands like helium, lithium, which require drilling?
Yeah. One thing that concerned me in the Democrat primary was a debate in Nevada when they went down the line. You would think Nevada, no brainer, you should be pro mining. And you had, I think Biden maybe wavered on the question, but you had someone like Warren that was like definitive, no, there's gonna be no drilling on federal land. And I was like, wait, what? that's crushing to a place like Nevada, especially if they want this, a fantasy land of all electric. I guess I shouldn't call it fantasy land, maybe it'll be a reality, but this idea of going all electric, it doesn't happen without an abundance of lithium and cobalt and other products. that currently we're heavily dependent on China for and other places.
Mhm.
And we did put in motion 2 massive lithium projects in Nevada. I'm sorry to focus on lithium, but it's something I talked a lot about. But 2 massive projects that ends up supplying like 25% of the world's supply. So I don't know what they do with that. There's things that they can complain about. Like there's, like a buckwheat there that might be sad if you dug it up.
Mhm.
A nearby rancher that might be sad, that they'll have to work their way through. And there's always going to be some level of interaction with Native Americans that, in some cases will be thrilled, other cases won't, that they'll have to
Right,
go
right.
through. But that's a very valid question. Like how, if we're going to say oil and gas is bad, and what else falls into that? Is it going to be helium, lithium, cobalt, rare earth minerals? What else is bad? So, I put it very simply and kind of at a very elementary level when it comes to minerals. And I said, especially this electric future, if you want that, you're going to have to dig some holes.
Right, right,
You're going to
right.
have to dig what amounts to a
Can't
hole.
throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah, yeah.
Very big holes in some cases, but you're going to have to turn over some dirt if you want to do these.
Or in other countries.
Yeah,
We
where
can, we
there's
can,
not.
we can import a lot of the lithium and those kinds of minerals from China and Russia and those kind of places.
Yeah, and if you think they have our same environmental controls, that's
No. What kind of final wrap up comments do you have? If you had to do a 2-minute departing speech from your job, what would you say?
I'd say we worked our butts off.
Going forward with some positivity too.
Looking back on the previous 4 years, I can tell you we worked really hard. I think that you titled this "What Happened." What happened the last 4 years at the Department of the Interior? So you can read that 2 different ways. You can say, "What happened?" Like, why did you screw up? Or what happened? And I think, the crew I was working with were all very kind of demanding, critical people that really love the country and love domestic energy, and we'll probably never be satisfied with what we did. Like I tried to take a positive look at it. Like, yeah, we did a lot of good things, but I'm never going to be 100% satisfied with what we did. And I think we're going to be our own biggest critics. But I can tell you that we were thinking about on the ground impacts every single day and jobs every single day. And I think it's always funny that Republicans in particular get attacked for being like, the friends of big oil and big oil this and that, when the circles that I'm in, we were always trying to think about mid-size and smaller producers. That's, and family jobs like that was always honestly more of our focus than whatever big oil means. So I can tell you that you at least had people that were trying to understand what you were going through and appreciated the jobs and product that was created. Looking forward, like I said, I shared my concerns about the new crew that I have. But at the end of the day, the product and the revenues and the jobs are so important that it'd be crazy to overlook that. And that's why it's going to be important to work closely with your local representatives at the state level and with your governor, just to be very clear and very vocal about what happens when you attack an industry like this that's so important. Yeah, I mean, the industry's been around for a long time. It's made huge leaps and strides in the last decade and a half. Like, I can't believe we are where we are, and for people to not appreciate that, just it blows my mind. I remember how we were freaking out on Capitol Hill when things looked so grim 15 years ago, and things really shot through the roof, and we were looking at where are we going to go next. And it wasn't looking good, and we were going deeper and deeper in the OCS. But here we are, where production is on federal land hit what do we hit? Well, we hit a new record in this last year for production on federal land, and we're really happy about that. So I think there's a lot to still be positive about. all I can do is encourage you to keep doing what you know how to do best and keep producing.
Well, and I think the producers and a lot of the listeners on our podcast they look for opportunities. I know I see several opportunities that are out there that weren't available last week. So just different ways of looking at things. So anyways, thank you, Casey. It was awesome for your time. You're really appreciate, what's next for you in the next, I know you're going to take a sabbatical and just kind of smell the roses and things like that for a while.
Next is I'm supposed to work on the closet downstairs.
Okay.
Stuff in the basement.
The 4 year, it's been on delay for 4 years, huh?
Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff to do around the house and find another, find the next step. But right now, just trying to decompress a little bit. I'm here in Virginia, and just like I said, the top thing to do is maybe get to know my family again and decompress.
Well, thank you for your service. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I look forward to hearing about what your next act might be. I think those of us in our business, and maybe in my demographic a little more than yours, I'm thinking about what my next act is going to be also. So anyways, awesome. Thank you, listeners. Next month, we have 2 February San Juan IQs. We have our regular San Juan IQs Tuesday, 9 a.m., February 16th. What are pricing expectations this year going to be? We have as our guest, Matt Marshall, Director of Aegis Risk Management. Will we see high prices, low volatility? Can we start in the San Juan Basin to plan to drill Mancos gas wells and oil wells 2021, 22? What does that look like? So that's going to be our regular San Juan IQ on February 16th. It's the third Tuesday at 9 a.m. We are also going to be putting together a new San Juan Prospect IQ, which is going to be next Tuesday, February 2nd, 25,000 acre San Juan Basin Mancos oil project of mine. And here's a short clip on what that's like. If it'll play. Hi, everybody. I'm Jerry McHugh with San Juan Resources. Looking forward to showcasing our San Juan Mancos oil project in the San Juan Basin. This project is surrounded by 50 million barrels of vertical oil and 250 million feet of gas. This is a great area. We put a lot of work into this. It's ready to go, ready to drill. This area is an analog to the DJR Enduring WPX area, where we have wells that we anticipate being in the 400 to 800,000 MBOE type wells. We are looking for a partner, because I've been doing all the heavy lifting myself, to help me take it to the next level. Or if somebody's interested, you guys have some type of thing. This is an exciting time. Looking forward to showcasing this on our San Juan Prospects IQ. Again, Casey, thank you very much for your time. We'll stay in touch. Appreciate your service again. Just amazing amount of things that you've accomplished for us in 4 short years at the Department of Interior. And thank you all listeners and attendees. Have a great day, and we will see you in a week on the Prospects IQ or in next month for the San Juan IQ on what future pricing is going to look like.